Welcome back, Levelin Up Nation. It is your host and success strategist, Brigham Blackham. I'm so blessed.
I want to tell my story, but it's like, no, it's not about telling your story. It's about giving the audience an anchor for a lesson they can use for themselves. Every time. It works every time. When I just show up as myself, not second guessing, just do the thing you know you're good at. 10 years later, I've gotten good at this job.
Welcome back, Levelin Up Nation. It is your host and success strategist, Brigham Blackham. I'm so blessed today. We have an amazing guest, Anne Bonney. She is a certified speaker extraordinaire and a redhead impersonator, someone that you do not want to miss this episode. You're going to hear a little bit about her background. And the title of our episode today is Do It Your Way. Well, why would that be? Because when you are able to make sure that whatever you're delivering as a speaker is your own and has your own spin on it, it's going to make such a world of difference in the way that you deliver that content. So excited to have her on today. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about her background and all the fun things she does. So, Anne, welcome to the call. So grateful that you're here. Oh, there it is. This is the view. Perfect. Good to see you.
Hey, great to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. Oh, man, this is going to be such a great conversation. Let's first start off. I know you are an energizing speaker. You help people dance in the discomfort zone. And there's a lot to that. So let's first unpack why you say that and then talk to us a little bit about your background.
Well, it all started on a warm summer day in July in 1973. Don't do the math. I've had a crazy background. We moved a lot. My dad worked for Marriott Hotels. And I got home from second grade and they said, we're moving to Saudi Arabia, which from Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri was a little bit of a switch. Lived for 2 years in Saudi, lived in Egypt for a year, Greece for 4 years. So my upbringing was not normal. There was a lot of change, a lot of moving around and discomfort, but healthy discomfort,
Yeah.
And I kind of continued my gypsy ways. I've had a kind of a crazy career background as well since then. I was a special needs teacher right out of college. Then I trained animals. I trained sea lions and seals at the New England Aquarium in Boston. Then birds of prey at the it was pretty fun. Then birds of prey at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. Then I decided I needed a big kid job with a 401k and upward mobility and all the things. Worked for Under Armour for about 8 years and helped launch that brand. Then had a few other corporate jobs before saying, well, this big kid job stuff is for the birds. I'm going to go quit it all, move into my parents' basement at 42 years old and see if I can do a speaking thing. That was 10 years ago. I feel like I'm just getting started. But it's going pretty well. So it's one of those things, we've talked about before where I took all of the things I learned and all of the things I overcame and sort of created a business for myself and a life that I absolutely love. And part of that meant learning how to dance in discomfort. And I think so many people are trying so hard to be comfortable, which is fair. I totally get it. And as I get older, I get it even more. But the big things, the extraordinary, the amazing, the big, woo, comes when we are willing to face the discomfort. So I'm hoping to inspire people to do that a little bit more.
I love it. And today we're definitely going to dance in some discomfort and find some fun. Thank you so much for going there. I love the energy and she's a firecracker. So guys, you buckle up. It's going to be a great episode. Here's the next question for you. One of the things that I love about speakers is they take their own experiences, they package it in such a way that it not only is fresh content, but it allows people to dive in deeper and connect deeper with the speaker. There's one thing to share a concept that's somebody else's that you're like, hey, I heard this in a book one time. And it's another to say, this was my experience. Here's the lesson I extracted from it. What did you get from that message? Would you mind talking to us about your process of sharing your own experiences and how that helps you tie in and connect deeply with the audience?
Yeah, and this is something that I've struggled with because you hear conflicting messages. You hear you can't be the hero of your own story. You hear, it's not about you getting up on stage to tell your story. And somebody in January, Kelly Swanson, she's an amazing storyteller and an amazing teacher of storytelling, said to me, she said, you can tell your own story as long as it's about the audience.
Mm.
And that completely reframed the way I think about telling my own stories. Because I have a lot of crazy stories. I've done a lot of really neat, fun, amazing things that have great lessons with them. A lot of my stories aren't necessarily relatable. You know, a lot of people in the United States have not grown up in Greece living in a hotel because it was cheaper than, you know, the hotel like put us up there. Like that, it wasn't because we were all fancy like Eloise. A lot of people haven't gone to Iraq on morale building tours or run a marathon on every continent or climbed Kilimanjaro or done a 10-day silent meditation retreat. So all of the things that I've gotten so many amazing lessons and discomforts from, I had to figure out how to make them about the audience. How do I create a situation where they can see themselves in this story, even though they've never been to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, you know? And that, you know, once you start to frame it that way and shift the spotlight from you to them, here's something new. Say, I want to tell my story, but it's like, no, it's not about telling your story. It's about giving the audience an anchor for a lesson they can use for themselves. So the spotlight really, really made a big difference in my storytelling.
This is such an important element, guys. In my storytelling framework, I'll review it really quick. It is significance and then translation of what it is that you're talking about to your audience so they know, oh, this is why it relates to me. And then you stay on point, you have the objective, and then you relive that story, and then you give them a clear call to action that's concise. That's the yes. So STORY. So let's talk about translation. How do you typically take these ideas, even though it feels like it's a foreign language, you translate it so that your audience says, oh, this story's for me. This value that you just created, I can use this here and here and here and here. Talk to us about your process.
Yeah, I don't start with the story. I don't say, how can I take this story and fit it in? I start with the message and what I'm trying to convey. And then I say, okay, cool. And I actually literally have a spreadsheet of stories. and you know, which story is going to best illustrate this point for this audience? And I think that's an important piece of it. Because so often we say, I want to tell that story. That's a spectacular story. But I feel like that's the wrong, when we try to fit a story to a message, I think it can feel forced. It's when we figure out what we're trying to say and then pick a story that fits that it becomes much more authentic and it becomes a greater connection. I mean, I just blathered off a bunch of stuff that I've done, but one of the key stories that is giving me so much impact in my keynotes is about my slow driving grandmother and my brother yelling at her. You know, I mean, it's not even anything spectacular. And it is the most memorable, I think, one of the most memorable stories in my keynote.
Uh-oh, now I feel like I need to hear that story. You can't just say, I've got this really great story, but we're going to let you just wait till next time. Give us the 3 to 5 minute version of that. I want to hear this.
Sure.
I'm going to highlight
It's a short, quick story. It's a short one anyway. So my grandmother, Margaret Bonney, was an English teacher. And she was very kind of stern. She was not a warm and fuzzy grandma. That was my other grandma. Grand Peggy is what we called her. And she also was a very cautious driver. I don't know what happened to her. She was cautious almost to the point of being dangerous and definitely to the point of inconveniencing everybody in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so one summer we're driving along, Grand Peggy's driving, comes to a 4-way stop. She lets everybody go, of course, comes to a complete stop, lets everybody go that it's her turn. And then she gives everybody at the intersection the look so they know that it's her turn. And once she feels that it's safe, she rolls slowly into the intersection. You can imagine, I'm 14, my brother's 16. We are like at the end of our rope, and I can see my brother starting to fume from his ears. And I see his head turn towards her and he yells, "Punch it, Margaret!" And the whole message here, as we've talked about change and being uncomfortable, is sometimes we need a little shove to get ourselves moving, to get that 5 seconds of courage. And punch it, Margaret, is what I use to move myself forward in that moment where I've thought about it, I've planned it, I know it's a good idea, I'm standing on the precipice, and I'm terrified to take the action. And that punch it, Margaret, can help you in that moment. I trademarked it. I got a sticker that says it, people yelling at me across
Punch it,
airports.
Margaret. Beautiful.
So I should get the tattoo, right? But
Oh,
like,
man,
it's
that's
this
so funny.
fun, memorable thing about my grandmother driving slowly down the street.
How many of us have a person, even if it's not our grandma, that definitely needs to punch it? So thank you for that story. That is beautiful. I feel like I can picture being in that car. I was like,
oh my God,
I've been behind people like that and never wanted to like lay on my horn longer.
You want to yell out the window, punch it!
Punch it! Come on, get out there. No, that's excellent.
But how many times have we been in that situation, right? We know we should make that phone call, that sales call. We know we should ask for the raise. We know we should go have that tough conversation with our neighbor, but we're standing on the edge of it, like terrified to move. We need that little shove.
Exactly. We need that a little initiation energy, a little starting, like a little nudge. I like that.
Right? It's the 5 seconds of courage that Matt Damon talks about in one of my favorite movies, We Bought a Zoo.
Ooh, now that makes sense for you because you definitely love the zoo side of things.
And if you guys haven't seen it, your family would love that movie. It is adorable.
I will definitely have to do that. I have not seen it yet, so that makes the list for sure. Let's hear this. One of the things that I'm always asked from people is, how do you not just be a speaker, because everyone can learn how to speak pretty quickly. It's how do you monetize your message? How do you make sure that you have an audience? How do you make sure that you're connecting and filling the arena, if you will? What is your experience actually getting in front of people?
I think, when new speakers talk to me and they ask me about how to become a speaker, I think one of the biggest first steps, and where I wish I'd started and took me about 5 years to get to, is you have to figure out who you are. What is your authentic message? There's so many tactics and strategies. I spent so many thousands of dollars on people's, frameworks and coaching programs and, do-it-yourself video programs. And all of that was super important to my learning. And none of it was the silver bullet, because especially in this business, my client is buying me. And you've said this before, if they don't know, like, and trust you, and I think it was Bob Berg who originally said it, but if they don't know, like, and trust you, they're not going to buy from you. Exactly. And so if you're all, hey, you want to buy a speaker? I can make your audience stand up at the end of every single thing by my foolproof program. Like, they're going to be like, no. Especially these days, because people have the BS detector on high. And so I think part of my success has been figuring out, who am I authentically? I'm Tigger. If Tigger and Richard Simmons had a baby, it would be me, right? That's me. I'm a spaz. I am not a dignified scientist person. I don't have a PhD, but I'm a lot of fun, and you're going to feel energized and you're going to feel good walking out of the room. Okay. And I've been on the stages where they were looking for somebody more dignified and science approached, and it fell flat. And I should have said no to those gigs. And I have since then, because I'm like, you don't want me. There are amazing speakers out there, Debbie Peterson, Crystal Washington, who are just so exactly what you want. And this isn't it. And I actually said that to, who was it? Credit Suisse from Geneva called me and said, we want you to come talk to our lawyers. So we've got Swiss lawyers, both very different than Anne Bonney. And I said, you've seen my videos, right? I'm like, are you sure this is what you want? She said, yes, you are exactly what we want. And I was like, okay, cool. As long as we're good. Like, because, but knowing who you are, knowing your motivation for wanting to speak will allow you to authentically show up, and it will translate so much better. That's the long answer. Sorry.
No, that's totally fine. I love it. Focusing on who you are at your genuine core. Living in your successes and what you've done, rather than trying to say, well, I can piecemeal all of these other things that I've experienced that are from other people's experiences and other people's books. Yeah. One of the things I absolutely love about what you do and what all these different great speakers do is they are very genuine to who they are and the experiences that they've had that can highlight principles. I love values that are communicated through storytelling, and principles, because a principle, you can say, this is how they learned that principle. That's how they came to this principle. How have I experienced that? And that's the relatability factor. One of my very favorite principles, it's actually at the very end of my book, it's called flip the switch. This is something that we all have to learn how to do it eventually as a speaker, because sometimes we get up and we don't want to be there. I don't know about you. There has been many times where you're just like, this happened, and then this happened, and this was awful. Shoot, this is a very low frequency and very low energy. I cannot step on stage with this low energy. So you have to have a state shift. And that state shift, I call flipping the switch, because when I was in college, I had someone named Marilee, who was my instructor. All of us were these groggy teenagers walking into our first period class. We're like, you've seen the teenagers. We were all like 19, 20, 21. And we were acting like children, because we were all like, I'm so tired. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. How am I going to get through my day? And she did our little vocal exercise. And then right after that, she's like, all right, we're going to have a real talk now. Sit down. And we're like, okay, you're being kids, crisscross applesauce. We're like, we are going to get a talking to. And we're sitting down. And she said, you have to be able to control your environment. You have to be able to flip the switch. And what that does for you is you can control any environment you're in by your energy. You get to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. If everyone else in here is really lame and boring and sad, you can walk into that room and say, you know what? I'm going to be my very best self. Mm-hmm. And if one person does it, it gives permission to everybody else to do that same thing. So I want to hear.
Or maybe not everybody, maybe just the few people in the room who really needed it.
Exactly. Well, let's hear this. When you hear that flip the switch concept, being able to change your state, what pops to your mind? What's a story that's attached to it? Because I know speakers, we got stories. What's one that comes to your mind?
For me, it's not the low energy. It's the, they don't want to hear me. They don't like me. They don't trust me because I have weird red hair. I'm this, spunky urban, person. And they're not all about this. And that's the voice that starts in my head. And I have talked myself out of 2 keynotes. I can remember them like it was yesterday. And I delivered, it was fine. It wasn't me. And so flipping that switch now, when I start to hear that voice, and I did this recently, it was for a pharmaceutical company. I'm about to go up. I'm like, these people are all scientists. They all are really smart. And I'm just the perky little Tigger bouncing up on stage. And I started to talk myself out of doing a good job. And I said, whoa, stop, hear it. Hear what you're saying. This is not true. And even if it is, it doesn't matter. They know who they hired. So, and this is what I say to myself. Somebody thought this was a good idea.
I like that. Somebody thought this was a good idea.
Somebody thought this was a good idea. So even if 90% of the people in this room don't respond to this, 10% will. And the person that brought you into that room brought you for a reason. Because again, I'm very intentional about, and so I give myself that little talk and I go out there and I do me, and it friggin' works every time. It works every time. When I just show up as myself, not second guessing, just do the thing you're good at. 10 years later, I've gotten good at this job. Believe that, right? And that's the switch that I have to flip.
I think that's beautiful. Just be yourself out loud. I think that's key. Absolutely key.
And also call upon all of the things you've done in the past, all the things you've figured out, all the times it went really, really well. Because there's so many more examples of that, but your brain's only going to pull up the negative ones. Like, you remember that time this went really bad? You remember the time you walked out of your shoe and then it got stuck in the stage? Actually, that was kind of fun. But, it reminds you of all the bad stuff. And it's like, no. And I learned this from a guy who did double Ironmans, which is like a 5-mile swim, 240-mile bike, and a 52-mile run, all in a row on the same day or two. Anyway, he said, I learned to talk to myself rather than listen to myself. And that makes so much sense, right? We hear the chatter in our head and it's like, no. I am good at this job. Somebody hired me for a reason. They know what they're going to get. Go give it to them. Don't try to be all dignified. That's not you. Be stupid. It's great. People like it. And it's who you are.
Beautiful. This is something that I find fascinating with speakers. You hear where they came from, what their background is, and you can see all of these different elements come together in who they are in their keynotes. What is something that you've experienced in the past? You're like, I had no idea that was going to be able to be useful, but now it is. Similar to the Margaret story, but something else. What's something else you're like, wow, I had no idea this was going to fit into my keynote, or this was going to be drawn upon and be absolutely essential? Okay, you got it. I can see it in your eyes. Go ahead.
I did. It just popped in. So I've done a bunch of marathons, and 26 miles. And this goes back to the double Ironman, what that guy was saying. 26 miles, you have a lot of time to talk yourself out of things or talk yourself into things. You also develop a lot of patience and the ability to just be here now and do what you're doing for a really long time. And one of the things that I think is really important with workshop. Now, my background, I have teaching background. I've done a lot of workshop work with adults and kids, but also keynoting. And that I think one of the benefits of those two skills coming together is that I can go in and out of facilitating a conversation with the audience or performing a keynote for the audience, which I think benefits my audiences. It's a whole lot more interesting. But one of the things that patience, that willingness to just be in this uncomfortable moment for a minute has allowed me to do is wait for the audience to participate. So often speakers will ask a question and they don't wait for an answer because that 4 seconds, 5 seconds is so uncomfortable of silence that they essentially teach the audience not to participate. Because they're like, who has an answer here? Nobody? Okay, cool. I'll tell you my answer. And it's like, the audience is like, okay, cool. They don't want me to participate because they didn't give me time. Whereas I've learned that patience and that dancing in discomfort to just make it awkward. I can wait. Like, we're good. I've run 26 miles in 7 hours, which is a really long time. And so like, I can wait 5 or 6 seconds. I'm okay with that. So, I mean, that's an obtuse example, but off the top of my head, that's what I got.
That's excellent. Wait for the audience to participate. This is one of those things that I've noticed as a comedian. There's something called wit lag. You've probably experienced this before, where you have a really great joke and you know it's funny and you throw it out there and you're just like, I'll just wait. You guys are going to get this. And then that one person's just like, oh my gosh, I get it. You're like, there it is. And they can comment on how all the other people didn't notice it quite yet. And that's how you know that you're being playful, is you dare the audience to laugh.
Right.
I love that.
And it's being in the room with them, right?
Yes.
It's not just blurting out your stuff. It's like, hey, I'm here with you guys. You get to play too. And I think that's such a cool thing for the audience.
For sure. One of the things I've learned, I had a great mentor, Dino Watt. He talked about the importance in workshops of making sure that you deliver the data and then you give interaction. A lot of times that looks like, hey, we're going to have you do a turn and talk, or you're going to do a simple little activity or exercise, and then you give those audience members in a workshop an opportunity to interact with each other, and then you do a share. What's been your experience running workshops that you're like, this has been really effective for me to increase engagement? Because I love great engagement.
Well, and I think allowing people to process the information and mess around with it before they're asked to talk to the whole group is really important. And you get more out of it because so many people don't like public speaking like you and I do. And they're not the first one to be like, I have an answer, And so if you allow them to interact with the information beforehand, you're going to get a much more meaningful response from them because they've had time and quiet and not the spotlight on them to be able to say it. So whether it's a parent share, whether it's hey, there's a slip of paper in the middle of your table, talk about that in relation to this information, and then we'll share afterwards, or whatever activity you do. I think being super clear about your instructions is vitally important. because when people are wandering and they don't know what you want them to do, they lose the point. And so I think in order to get that meaningful interaction, giving them clear instructions, giving them the time, and then also, I don't like calling anybody out. I don't like saying, right. You, Brigham, what do you think about this? Or you with the red hair, because that person with the red hair may be the one person in the room who hates talking in public the most.
Yeah.
And not only have I just mortified them, but every other person in the room is now terrified that I'm going to call on them. And I've alienated a lot of people. And then the empaths who are sensitive to the people who don't want to be called out are also like, wow, Red, that was rude. So it's
wow, Red.
Build that trust through clarity, through time, and through not putting anybody on the spot. That's my perspective.
Absolutely. This is something that I learned as an instructor with Mandarin Chinese that is so essential, especially at the beginning. It's called a pause and point. If you're talking about something and you need to make sure that your directions are extremely clear and you have it written somewhere, literally pause, and then they will read it. If you read it for them, a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I heard you say that and I looked at it and now I don't understand what you said. Giving people time to process is a superpower, and it can be so uncomfortable as a speaker. But
it goes back to that pause, right? That willingness to take the 5 seconds to just shut up for a minute. And I'm the biggest culprit of not shutting up. Believe me, you know this now.
I get there too. Every single one of us that get really excited, it's kind of like that Tigger mentality you said. We definitely want to take time to slow it back down and be real for a moment. And then after we process it, then we can say, how do I actually feel about this? And then we can have a cool conversation about it. Let's go here for a second.
Sometimes it means cutting your content a little bit and saying, okay, I'm not going to deliver as much. I'm going to pick what's really pivotal and allow them time to interact with the knowledge, because then they're more likely to walk away and actually use it, which is the whole point.
Right. That's why it's called a keynote and not a keynotes. I think that's a great distinction.
Yeah.
If you try and cram too much into it, there's something called information overload. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago and we had 3 lawyers back to back that, oh man, it was 8 hours of content in 30 minutes. And I was just like, guys, I already know mostly what you're saying, but I'm going to doodle in my notes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got myself, I was like, yeah, I have no idea where you're going with this, but thanks for the half an hour of my life I can't get back. Hopefully that's not you. Hopefully that's not something that you ever do. But if you catch yourself literally information dumping on people, take a step back and be like, well, if I was in the audience, would I want to come back to this keynote? And if you wouldn't, you're like, I might need to simplify. Elegance is in simplification. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Or if you walked out and said, hey, what did you take away from that? And they can't give you anything without looking at their notes. They're like, I don't know. They're never,
my friend George Bryant, I love this guy. I've had him on the podcast a couple of times. He talked about the importance of taking your message, simplifying it in such a way that your audience can use it, whether you're there or not, without you being present. They're like, oh, I can take this idea and implement it. If you have to be present because you didn't do the work to make some mnemonics or make a very impressionable story, I'm sorry, the content is in one ear and out the other. Yep. So that's the Margaret thing again, right? Yeah, like, well, let me pull out this manual. You're like, oh goodness, I don't even want to. It's weighty with authority. You're like, it's weighty because it's holding down my papers on my desk and I'm not opening it.
Right.
So let's go here for the last few minutes. What has been one of those gauntlet things that you've experienced as a speaker? One of those like, oh, this was a horrible experience that now I can use to help other speakers. Could have been like a mic went out. Could have been, hey, I had this heckler, had some crazy experience like falling off a stage in high school. It totally happens sometimes. What was one of those things like, I'm glad I went through this gauntlet. Here's a little warning for you so you don't have to as well. I'll let you put the pieces together. What's a warning or an experience that you've had? You're like, oh, I got some stuff I'm going to share.
Well, I've fallen off a lot. I've fallen off stage twice, actually, when I was in
Nice.
elementary school and then in high school. The second time was just because I was mad because they didn't give me enough space and they were asking me to dance. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to fall off. But anyway, I've grown up since then. I think that the hardship that I went through that has made me say, oh, well, this probably isn't as bad as that. When I was 9, and again, we lived overseas. So we lived in Saudi Arabia at the time. We went to India on a vacation, and my brother got violently ill in his stomach. We had a flight delay. We're sitting in the airport in India. My brother is sick as a dog. We have a 6-hour layover because our flight is now delayed. And my dad is planning to have us sleep in the airport for the 6 hours. And it was overnight too. It was like 10 o'clock at night. Our flight wasn't until maybe 6 o'clock the next morning or whatever. My brother's sick. My mom is pissed. And my dad is planning. We're sitting there for 2 hours. And finally, my mom says, we are not staying here anymore. My son is sick. We need to go have a bed to lay down. We're checking into the hotel, even if it's just for 5 hours. Who cares? We're doing the thing. But I remember that 2 hours in the airport with my brother being violently ill. I was, of course, tired, annoyed, little 9-year-old. And it was just such a dismal experience that ever since then, it's always kind of been my callback. When something goes wrong, well, at least I'm not stuck in the airport in India. Not that the airport in India was that bad. Now, it was in the 80s, so it was different. But not that the airport was that bad. But it was just like the whole scenario was just
the airport is fine. It is very good. Right? Very, very nice airport.
Right.
No,
so the whole thing was it's always been that moment that I call back to, and like, well, at least we're not sick in the airport in India.
Yeah. There's something that's interesting that pops up for me. A lot of times we have these experiences that kind of level up our emotional experiences. For some of us, maybe that's the height of your emotional experience is I've never been more felt more discomfort than in India. All of us have 100% of what that looks like. Now, our 100% may be drastically different than somebody else's. And this is a key distinction. I think of my friend who had such an awful experience growing up. He had something that happened to him. I don't have permission to share it, so I'm not going to share all of it, but he had something I was like, that is so much more emotional harm than I can even conceptualize. I'm like here on his emotional harm scale.
Yeah.
We don't know other people's full story and experience, but what we can know is if it is our 100%, we're going to be in distress. And we have to figure out, how do I get back to that state shift where we can actually process? Because if we have super high emotion, we have low intelligence. And that equals bad decisions. Although bad decisions do make great stories. So but you might have a few of those. I know I surely do.
I've never messed anything up.
You've never messed anything up. What would be one of those stories that you're like, I don't even know if I've shared this on stage before? What's a story that you're like, I've always wanted to share this. I've never had an opportunity to. I want to hear one of those stories when you're like, this was not perfectly polished, but this is a good one. I want to hear one of those Anne stories, behind the scenes type of fun things.
Good Lord.
I love it when there's that look. You're like, oh, what do I draw on? I'll bet something happened at the zoo.
Funny because you're like, nope, can't tell that one. No, probably shouldn't tell that one. No, I'm not gonna tell that one in public. Oh gosh.
One that's appropriate for public, right?
I know.
You're like, oh shoot, this one's not appropriate. Like taking all these ones. Like, oh,
skinny dipping, no.
You're like, no. Skinny dipping with the Boy Scouts. Yep.
Okay, not. I got one.
Let's hear it.
It's one of those super cringe moments. So I worked at Under Armour. I was in customer service. So if you needed a T-shirt for your kids' Pop Warner football game, you'd call me. I'd send it out. Good to go. This was back early days, 2003. And early days of email, early days of like all the things and technologically. So I had ordered something for a friend of mine at my discount. The person who had put in the order messed up the order for me. And I sending an email to my friend saying, oh my God, this person messed up the order. You'd think they'd want to get out of that, terrible department, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of went off and was just super catty and not kind and mean and awful. And instead of forwarding it, I replied to the person who messed up the order. And because I was moving fast and I was just kind of boom. And then I was like, oh, and it was like that no moment. But it was such an important lesson in human interaction. Because that department that I just was like, you think they'd want to get out of that stupid department, was where I started with the company. And so the person who hired me to have this wonderful 9-year career at Under Armour was the person that I just like trashed her department and the person that worked for her. And immediately I was like, oh crap, what do I do? I tried to recall the message, but you know how that works. There's a camera that goes on when you're like, recall, right? That puts on the internet to share your terrible moment with the world. So it was one of those, like, what do I do? I apologized to the person that I sent the email to and just took responsibility and was like, I have no excuse. I was a jerk. There was no reason to do that. There's no value in it. I recognize that now. I apologized to their boss, who was the person who hired me at Under Armour. Then I went to my boss crying. And I think he was so terrified that I was like, I just did this thing. And I'm so sorry. I think he was so terrified that I was bawling at his door that he's like, you're fine. Just stop crying and leave. And then I went to HR and I said, here's what happened. Here's what I did. I took full responsibility for it. So I don't know how to fix this because there is absolutely no justification. I was just plain a jerk. And it's one of those moments where taking responsibility was the best move and the most uncomfortable thing I've ever had to do. Because I want to be a nice person, because I want to be the person that everybody likes. And it was an incredibly important lesson of just don't be a jerk, man. There's no value in that. And so, so there you go.
There you go. Sometimes
there you go.
We go through those types of experiences. I've had many where you make a dumb choice and you're like, now I have to live with that.
Right.
Sometimes
I have to live with my stuff. But had I not had that experience, I might not have thought as critically about the impact of being a mean jerk, being catty and being that way, that reactive thing. Pause, and say, okay, how do I want to respond to this so I don't end up in that situation again? Because that was some hot soup.
Absolutely. That reminded me of one of my favorite plays called Doubt, a Parable. You ever heard of this one or seen it? So good. There's this moment where the pastor, he goes and he shares this experience. It's an allegory, basically, because there's all this catty, backbiting gossip that's happening in their parish. And he shares this fictional story of this Irish priest that had this lady that came and gave confession that she had talked bad about her neighbor and started gossiping a little bit. He's like, wait, is gossip a sin? And you're like, well, yeah, I think it is a sin. Absolutely. We're like, all right, well, how are we going to make this right? What she's thinking. He's like, well, here's what I need you to do. I need you to go and get a pillow, take it up on the very top of your roof. I need you to gut the pillow. She's like, all right, pastor, I'm going to go do that. And she goes and takes it onto the top of the roof and she guts the pillow and the feathers go everywhere. And she comes back. She's like, all right, I did it. Am I penitent? Am I okay? And he's like, no, I need you to go back onto the top of the roof and I need you to pick up every single feather. She's like, I can't do that. There was wind. It went everywhere. He's like, and that right there is gossip. I was like, oh, so good. That is the imagery that always pops into my head anytime I hear gossip. It's like that black sappy tar that just gets on everything, just like those feathers in the wind. So we have to be cautious with what we say and how we treat other people, because what we do matters. So thank you so much for that example. I love the reminder too. So I really appreciate that. Now,
Yeah.
in the last moment that we have together, I would love to hear, what's your legacy you want to leave? What is the thing that you want people to be like, you know what? That's why I enjoyed experiencing Anne. This is what she did for me. What is the message you want people to take away from you, your career, your experience? Let's talk about legacy for a moment.
Oh, legacy. I don't think I'm old enough to talk about legacy, but let's do it. You never know what's the bus might hit me on the way out the door. I had a psychic at Burning Man once time, and that sentence is loaded with a whole nother episode.
Wow. A
I have a
psychic
psychic
at Burning Man. Okay.
told me once, they were doing their brain thing as we sat there with our eyes closed, and they started grinning and giggling. And they looked at me afterwards and said, "You leave fat flowers in your footsteps." And I literally started bawling because that's what I'd like. I'd like people to be like, "Oh yeah, I liked her." Oh yeah, you know, like it was good to be, I felt good being around her. You know, whatever they learn from me, whatever they take away, I just want them to be like, "Oh yeah, I really like that lady." You know, that would make me happy.
Yeah. Just knowing that you put a smile on somebody else's face.
Well, life is
Right.
tough and it's heavy and it's hard. And so if I could just be a little bright spot or a little white flower, that would be lovely.
I totally agree. That's beautiful. Every single one of us have the opportunity to leave flowers in footsteps, but do we? Do we leave the opportunity with a smile? Do we leave people better than we found them by sharing great insights and experiences? I think you definitely did that today. I enjoyed being around you, and I know that our audience did. And this is going to be one of those episodes they definitely want to come back to, and they need a little bit of shot in the arm to get a little bit of excitement and energy. So tell us a little bit.
Margaret.
Yeah, punch it, Margaret. Tell my audience where they can continue to interact with you, where maybe you're going to appear next. Tell us a little bit about how they can interact with you online.
Yeah, sir. Yourchangespeaker.com is my website. AnneBonney.com will get you there. Interestingly, AnneBonney.ninja will get you there. Give it a shot.
Bonnie.ninja.
Yeah, you can also find me on the socials and everything, but the links from there are on my website. So yourchangespeaker.com is my website. See you there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Guys, if you want to keep leveling up your life, keep hearing amazing speakers just like Anne, keep here. Subscribe, like. What we're doing is making some magic every single day. So remember, like and subscribe. I'll put this on there. Want to make sure that it is something that's of value to every single one of you. Oh, I didn't hit the blue. There we go. Bam, like and subscribe.
Ooh.
Oh, cool. All right, we're going to hold on. There we go. That's the one I wanted to hit. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.